Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 5 of the Sajin Photography Podcast. My name is Jason Teal and I have a great interview set up for you today. Now, this was done a little while ago and I apologize for the late release. I have been under the weather and extremely busy over the last couple of weeks, but I'm going to make a solid effort to get more podcasts out as soon as possible. And I'm feeling a little bit better, but if you can hear in my voice, it's still a little bit there, the coldness and whatnot. But at any rate, without further ado, I really want to get into this interview with none other than Andy Faulk, who is an amazing photographer. I had met him in Korea with the legendary photographer Dylan Goldby, and we have sort of crossed paths here and there. And then he abruptly moved to Tokyo, which I was very fortunate enough to bump into him again a number of years ago. Well, not bump into him. I basically said, hey, I'm coming to Tokyo and I want to meet up. But at any rate, we had a great time kind of kicking around his neighborhood for a bit. And Andy's one of those guys that you can, basically you meet once and you just sort of, you're like brothers. And I truly feel that he's one of those people that is such a positive influence on not only the people around him, but the photography community in general. And I'm pretty sure that this affects how he takes pictures with like some of the high level clients that he does. There's this level of friendliness, but also professionalism. And that's what I really, truly kind of aspire to be, because I'm terrible in many situations like that, but Andy just sort of floats through with that southern flair that he's got, and you'll also hear it in the interview. So without further ado, I want to jump into this interview, and it's going to take a while, and I'm just going to basically let you know right now, I'm going to do my best to sort of cut out some of the ums and ahs, but this is basically going to be a rough, unedited interview, because honestly, I just want to get this interview out, and I don't want to spend another week of, nitpicking the ums and ahs from my own side. Andy's pretty smooth on the mic, and you'll hear it in his voice in a moment. So without further ado, I want to get into this. So I'm going to stop, and we're going to jump right into this amazing interview. I hope you guys all enjoy it. Welcome to the show, Andy. Thank you so much for taking the time out and coming on. I just want to formally welcome you here, and because we haven't talked a lot in a while, just give a short introduction to the audience, and then also just catch me up on what you've been up to these days.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Jason. It's been a long time. We haven't seen each other in like 8 years now, I think.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Something like that. Things have been good. Like yeah, mm-hmm. Things been good here. Living in Japan still. My wife hasn't left me, which
it's always a plus.
Yeah, he's still here. I have a kid who's awesome. He's about to turn 8. And,
oh wow,
things are trucking along. I can't complain. Weather's beautiful outside, and yeah, mm-hmm. I'm happy to be alive, man. You?
Excellent. I am doing good. It's of course the fall season here in Asia, so of course I can imagine. Tokyo is absolutely amazing, as Korea is with all the fall colors, but
it's getting there slowly.
Yeah, it's getting there slowly but surely. Now I kind of want to jump into it, because like I met you initially in Korea, and I know that you're originally from North Carolina, so plotting that course from America to Korea to Japan, how did this? Probably, I think you've been abroad for a couple of decades now. Like, how did this sort of come about, and how did you get into the whole like photography spiel?
Sure. It's a great question. Originally from Tennessee, and then mm-hmm. bounced to North Carolina for college. I call North Carolina home. That's where mm-hmm. my home is for sure, and in the States. My wife and I, we met teaching first grade. We were both first grade teachers in North Carolina. And when we started dating, I had just come back from teaching abroad in Prague, Czech Republic. And I realized when I was living in Czech Republic that I wanted to be an expat. Mm-hmm. America's got a lot of great things going for it, but I feel probably more myself when I am abroad, especially in Asia. Asia feels like home now for sure. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we were teaching in first grade together, and I was really falling in love with her, and seeing potential to have a truly long-term relationship with my wife. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to throw out to see how she would react to it was a binder. I threw out a JET program binder. So for anyone that doesn't know what JET is, it's a basically a language teaching program in Japan. And I didn't necessarily want to teach languages. I'd found out that wasn't for me when I was living in Prague. But I was still an educator and teaching in the public school system, and I knew that there were possibilities to teach abroad, and I wanted to do that. So I just kind of asked her, it's like, hey, would you ever move to Japan and do this thing? And I kind of plopped down the binder in front of her. Yeah. And she just flipped through a couple pages and was like, oh yeah, for sure. I'd do it, heartbeat.
Oh wow!
As soon as she said that, I was like, okay, this is the girl. I'm going to be with her. Shortly thereafter, I did propose to her. She said yes, thank God. And within maybe 8 months, we had gotten married and sold all of our possessions, and we found a job teaching in Seoul. So where we met, of course. So we went and we were teaching at Seoul International School, wonderful school, Southern Seoul, and we really, really liked it, and it was great. Professionally, we were finally doing what we wanted to do professionally. But after a couple years in Seoul, Jason, I got really depressed, and I was not dealing well with that. Just kind of staying at home a lot, not really seeking anything to get myself out of the funk that I was in. And she had bought me a camera before we got married as sort of a wedding gift or an engagement gift. And I hadn't really utilized it a lot. And so my wife really encouraged me to kind of get the hell out of the house with that camera, because I was spreading my funk, if you will. And so I got out. I got out of the house and picked up the camera and just started shooting and learning a bit of the trade and figuring out how to work a camera, and fell in love with it. And for a couple of years there in Seoul, I got the bug. I became obsessed, and I worked myself out of that depression more or less, and found a new hobby at that point. Yeah, so that's where the photographic journey started. Really, was with that depression in Seoul.
I think that's something that I found kind of a similar situation, and like part of what I noticed was that when you pick up photography in that state of mind, I found anyway that I sort of sought the beauty of life. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but
not at all.
For me, it's like your day-to-day grind can be monotonous, but when you pick up that camera, you're sort of looking for these little stories or these little bits of beauty in everything else around you. And I think it does have that uplifting moment. Would you agree with that, or how did the photography thing sort of help you?
I would definitely agree with that, and finding beauty in what you see as beauty. I think that I found beauty after the fact that I was taking the images. I could find beauty when I reviewed the images, but I think the thing that really helped me with the aspect of photography that truly helped was the meditative aspect. It was the escapism of it. I found that as soon as I pulled my camera to my eye, life was quiet and my brain stopped, and nothing else mattered but what was in the viewfinder.
Yeah.
And it was hyper focus, and it was incredibly mindful. And like you were saying, like, I don't want to be cliche, but similarly, I don't want to be cliche, but it's the truth. I found that was probably the best form of meditation or mindfulness practice that I could find at that time in my life, and it was perfect for me. And I found extreme joy in just being able to let everything fall away and just focus on a two-dimensional plane, and that's all that mattered, was what was in the viewfinder. And that's where I sat for hours and hours and hours every day. It was great.
That's awesome.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, to be honest, especially in this day and age, like, people, I don't want to throw Instagram under a bus, but I think people want that hit of dopamine that comes from other people liking their shit. And where I'm pretty sure where we're talking, the time frame was pre Instagram,
Yes,
pre Facebook likes,
correct.
and I think there was more of an intrinsic value to it. Like, when you go out strictly for the sake of photography, there's no like, will people like this, or am I going to get 100 likes on this photo? It was more like, this is my time, this is what I'm doing. And there's that I call it the tunnel vision, where it's like, through your eye, through the lens, out there. um do you think that's changed a little bit? Like, are people less, it's less of a meditative practice and more of a, like a, yeah, like a dopamine hit? Or
Well,
do you think it's different for per person?
I think it's definitely different per person. I can't lie that now, especially in the Instagram age and the social media age, those Instagram hits, those likes, those double clicks, I get those dopamine rushes too. And to say that I don't think from time to time, will someone like this, or will this image be received well, would be a lie. I do. However, I still believe for myself in my own practice that I'm doing it for myself.
Mm.
And the majority of the time that I am behind the camera, I still do my best to be mindful, to kind of get into the state of meditation and mindfulness, and just being with myself and being okay with being alone with my camera. And I think that that's something I really want to hold on to. I mean, that's the reason why I picked up the camera. And it still remains my escape, a very healthy escape, I think. But for me, that's where I'm happiest, artistically and creatively, is in that space by myself, in that tunnel vision. I think that's a great word for it. I mean, that's what I love. But I realize that people pick up the camera for different reasons, and I'm no person to be able to judge their motivations for that.
Exactly. Now, I have to touch on, like, your bio. I will fully admit, I perused the website, and I scanned the bio to read what you've got. And you mentioned that you were a country boy at heart. And I wonder, because, like, I'm for lack of a better term, I'm a hick myself. But we're both living in these, like, sprawling metropolises. I come from a city of 55,000 people at most, if you include some of the cows around.
Yep.
How does this, like, has it influenced your approach to shooting in places like Seoul and Tokyo, for the good or for the worse? Like, how has that sort of rural upbringing influenced you as, like, Mr. Tokyo photographer now?
Well, that's a great question. Really great question. I come from a similar background. I by no means do I come from a family that are farmers, or agriculture is not. I never worked the fields, and I won't pretend. I won't pretend that I did, but I did spend most of my youth outside, in a rural setting, as you mentioned.
Yep.
Forests and creeks and cornfields and tobacco fields. That's where I feel most comfortable, for sure. Oh, yeah. I remember, plucking the feathers from my dad's freshly killed ducks, and, getting dirty and being out in nature a lot. Those were my formative years. Coming back to your question, though, do I think that has influenced how I shoot in one of the largest cities, if not the largest city in the world, here in Tokyo, in Seoul, in Korea, and you being in Korea? I think it has, in the sense that, coming back to that tunnel vision and meditative flow. I think that being in a rural environment in my youth helped me be okay being alone, in vast spaces. Right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In the forest, in a river, in a field. And I feel that when I get that tunnel vision, when I'm out there shooting, the city somehow turns into the same type of environment. It's a vast forest. It's a big field. It just happens to be full of neon and moving people, and trains and noises. But I think that when I'm with my camera, there's some sort of stillness and quietness that reminds me a lot of a small town Americana, where there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing but, the birds and and the wind coming through the trees,
Mm-hmm.
and the leaves start falling off, and there's still a hustle and bustle to that, but it's a subtle one and not
Mm-hmm.
a jarring one. But I think that there are a lot of similarities in that, and so I think that it has influenced me, just in the sense that I can become calm and just be a part of something bigger, whether it's a forest or a city, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it totally does. Like it's again, cliches, urban jungle. It's something that, like, I think probably that last trip I did to Tokyo, you brought up a good point about um, I forget where I was actually shooting. It was like Shibuya or one of the main like touristy areas. But yeah, it was that same thing where it was like chaos is around. There's like neon signs flashing, traffic everywhere, thousands of people, but there is that stillness because you're waiting for that shot. You're waiting for the lights to change to
Right.
get that shot, and you know, it's that stillness. So very, very cool.
Well, the camera forces you to do that, right, Jason?
Yeah, exactly.
To get the shot that you want requires a certain amount of the stillness and patience.
Yeah.
And to be able to get a full experience in, a rural environment, you get still as well. So I think that, being in an area like Tokyo or Seoul or, any other metropolis in Asia, just being still, being patient, and not worrying about moving with, moving with the flow, but being a part of that is fun. It's good.
Well, and I think too, like there's like one of the other things, because again, like coming from the prairies and whatnot, every time I go back, like you have to kind of throw a little bit of a switch because I think the last time I was in the mountains, I was up shooting, and it just occurred to me that there was like cougars and bears, in the area that can actually, you're their lunch. So, you know,
Yes.
you know, um, but it was that sort of the observation, like where, like when you're in a forest or an urban jungle, I guess, you do have that sort of uh, observational skill where you're looking around your environment. And I think it's just, um, I found anyway, if you grew up in the city, you sort of have those blinders on. It's you're getting to your destination, and if something pops up in front of you, yeah, you can see it. But where you have like the rural, where it's such a vast open space, you do gain that sort of observation, like that patience, where you can step back and look around and see that scene unfolding in front of you. It might be in the city that you're not really feeling 100% a part of it. I'm not sure, but it's that observational skill, I think, that also gets heightened
Yeah,
in different environments.
and I feel like that observational sense is probably the root of a lot of my photographs. Is just taking a photograph of some small slice of the larger urban jungle, as you call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
All right. Well, jumping in, you offer a like kind of a diverse range of photography services, from editorial to documentary, and we talked a little bit about this before, like when we were sort of getting ready for this. But um, how do you navigate those different genres? Because you said like sometimes you have clients that will not go into a shoot if they see that you're a family photographer or something like that. Like, how do you juggle all those different genres and still come out on top as you do?
Sure. Well, that's another complex question. Well, let's deconstruct that and go with the segment there you're talking about, how some clients might not be very interested in you as their primary shooter. If you shoot a wide range, we see constantly on the internet, blog post after blog post of professionals or industry leaders, influencers, etc., constantly promoting the ideal that we have to specialize. We have to be, put ourselves into a niche market and then focus on the niche market and then rise to the top of the niche market and climb until you're on top of that one pole of photography or one genre. But that's really, really hyper limiting. I think as a generalist, someone who shoots everything from families. I shoot families to commercial photography for Fortune 500 companies. I think that I navigate each of those different genres and their different characteristics just by holding on to a consistent style. I don't change. I really don't change much depending on what genre I'm shooting. I would like to think anyway that stylistically I approach a family shoot, artistically and stylistically, just like I would a product shoot or a commercial shoot for a big name brand. I think that I just try to hold my style and stay true to my own vision of how I want to shoot things. And I think that the clients that I work with and the clients that I've built relationships with realize that it doesn't really matter if I shoot families or if I shoot product or if I shoot commercial or editorial or documentary, as long as I have a consistent product to offer them, I might be a contender for a job, which is great. Yeah.
And I think it's important because like what I see it is like if someone's a studio photographer, like if they're only shooting in the studio and as you said, like they got to the top of their area of their niche. As you and I both know, like some of the times like things change. Like when they have a client set up, okay, he's going to be in the studio, and then it's like, look, I can't get out of the office, so can you shoot me on location, or we'll go outside. And I think like that's where you run the danger of like if you're natural light or busy. No, I can't. And I think like we often hear that term jack of all trades, master of none. But I think where I see with you, it's like you're a jack of all trades, master of all. Like it's sort of like you're pushing that boundary of, you do families very well, you do this very well. I don't think it's a limiting factor at all.
Well, I don't think it's a limiting factor. It hasn't been a limiting factor for me for the most part. Of course, you're going to come across a random client that feels that you're not a suitable contender for a job because you might work with, say, families, and that somehow now you can't do a commercial shoot. But I wouldn't consider myself a master at anything. But what you're really pointing to, Jason, I think is important, not just with photography, but with anything, is just the idea of adaptability. And let's just moving out of the photography realm. You use a great example with, I only shoot in studio. I don't understand natural light. There is a constricting nature to holding yourself to one genre where, you could be a master of that one genre, but what else is out there? What else is possible? And even if you want to stay on top of the pole of that one genre or that one silo, by exploring different genres, you're finding different aspects of different genres that you can incorporate into your own specialized niche that might add to your skill set, that might lead you to realizing there's something else next for you that could even elevate your craft past that top tier, past that where you become experimental and you might bend the genre to a new level just by being flexible, being adaptable, and being willing to step out of what you're comfortable with and play and explore. And hell, what's the worst thing that happened? You realize that you like shooting for Fortune 500s, you like shooting families, and you like shooting food, and having fun with those and doing all of them well is okay.
Yeah. And also, like, I think, kind of going through sort of like what you're talking about too, I think there's also skill sets that like transfer over, like you mentioned about like you maintain the same approach to shooting families as you do Fortune 500s. And I think like what I sort of see is that, like if you have a certain personality with a family where you make them feel comfortable, and then you bring that into, shooting for a Fortune 5, like a business guy, like you can adapt to those situations. And, the same sense is like, we often forget that, like, one of my favorite all-time photographers, Salgado, like, he
Oh,
used to
well, wow.
be, like, I remember back in the day, he was it like a wartime, like, and I see his landscapes or his black and white, and I'm just like, ugh. And,
Abs- yeah,
you know,
the skill set, like we were talking about the transferable nature of skill sets.
mm,
I love that you mentioned Salgado there. Talk about masters.
yeah,
His work in Africa,
yep,
I believe, you know, I believe he spent a lot of time in Rwanda, focusing on
hmm
genocide in '94. I think it was the year, and
yep,
then, like you said, he's moved over to capturing beauty in landscapes, and it's stunning. But if you look back at Salgado's earlier work
yep,
and his more recent work, you can see the consistent styling. You can see
yep,
the consistent nature of composition. You can
exactly.
see what he learned through, his documentary work that
Hmm
he's easily applying to his landscape photography. And most people would be like, "What? What do you mean? What?
Yep,
How can?" You're like, no, there's two different genres.
yeah,
He can't do that. He can't do both, but he does them both and more. What so well.
yeah, yeah,
Transferable skill set. He's adaptable. Was an adaptable photographer and a true inspiration. Yeah.
exactly.
Now I
Uh,
got to get back into the Salgado. Thanks.
yeah.
That's Friday night.
Yeah, well, it's
You
on
just,
my
you
list too.
just put me on a rabbit hole there. Thank you.
We'll both be going down there because I want to dive into that kind of. I think he's got a new book that came out. Well, it's been on my reading list a little while ago. Um, I forget what it's called now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but yeah, I've got to dive in and check those photos out because
Well,
it's.
Christmas is right around the corner, and I can just send you my address if you wanted to send me a copy of that.
I might actually because it. I'll be digging through the Amazon links, so we'll
So,
go there. uh, Now, kind of abruptly jumping into kind of your professional work here, because I think like part of one of the things that I love talking to you is that you're probably like the most down to earth guy, and we've had lunch in Tokyo, we've chatted, and then when I look at your client list, New York Times, Hugo Boss, I think you photographed some Hollywood celebrities on their motorcycle trip across Tokyo and stuff. Um, do you have any sort of I would say memorable moments in photographing like Fortune 500 companies or zombie slaying guys that you want to share with the crew?
zombie slaying guys. Norman Reedus, is that the
Yep,
guy you're talking
that's the
about?
guy I'm talking about. Yep.
Sure. Mr. Norman Reedus. Yeah, I got to spend a few days with Norman and the crew for Ride. Norman Reedus. I'm going to be honest with you, Jason. Let's just get really really
Yeah.
candid. I didn't know really who Norman Reedus was when I got the call from AMC to work on it, work
hmm
on Ride. His show, where it's a really cool show. The premise
Mm.
is that Norman Reedus hops on a motorbike and brings his celebrity friends around the world, and they go on cool motorbiking adventures.
hmm
Uh, I I never watched The Walking Dead. I wasn't
Oh,
really
really?
familiar with it. I didn't know it was a thing. And I called my sister in the States. She's pretty knowledgeable about many different things. She's a wonderful person. And I said to my sister, I was like, hey, Katie, do you know this guy named Norman Reedus? And she kind of screamed over the phone a little bit. I was like, am I supposed to know? She's like, yeah, you're supposed to know this guy. I'm like, all right, that's cool. That's cool. I was just happy to, get a job, just like any
Yeah.
photographer. When when a job comes up, you just get excited that there's a chance that you get to do what you love and get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Norman and the Ride crew came over, and I got to spend a few days with them, and that was super cool. I'm not a person that really gets starstruck.
Okay.
I've been around several famous people throughout life, and people are people.
Yeah.
People are people, and Norman was more than kind, and it was nice to hang out with him. Ironically, my highlight, if Norman Reedus happens to be listening to this, sorry Norman, but being around him was not actually my highlight from that job.
Oh wow.
There was one of his co-stars in The Walking Dead, and I believe Ryan Hurst is also in Sons of Anarchy,
Oh wow. Yeah.
maybe in a couple films. But Ryan Hurst flew in for one of the episodes
Mm-hmm.
that they were filming, and I was on set for, and it was so cool when I wasn't familiar with Ryan either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when Ryan flew in, when he arrived, and we crewed out and picked him up, he was wearing a turban and um, um, was in linens, and his wife, were in linens as well. And I was a bit confused. I was like, "What's going on here?"
Mm-hmm.
And I started talking to Ryan, and he had just come from India, and where he had been studying Sikhism, and I think that he is now a Sikh and is converted to Sikhism.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm an India-phile as well. I've spent a lot of time in India, maybe
Oh wow.
14, 15 trips over the years, and my highlight from that job was not hanging out with the zombie slayer, but was talking about Hinduism and Sikhism and our love for India with Ryan Hurst. So
Oh wow.
it was a bit surreal talking with Ryan Hurst about photographing in India and our love for Indian culture
Mm-hmm.
and discussing Indian religions. And Norman Reedus sitting across the room from us, having his own conversation. And I realized that I should have been more interested in hanging out with Zombie Slayer, but I really was interested in hanging out with Ryan Hurst and hearing all about his recent adventure in India and what he had been doing with Sikhism. So that
Oh
was
wow.
probably my highlight from that job.
Well,
Sorry, Norman Reedus.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, just if he's listening. But
Sorry, Norman.
I think that's kind of an interesting point because like you I will say that kind of jumping into this whole situation because I'm trying to picture like yeah, as you said, like Norman Reedus sitting across the table from you. You're having this conversation with probably another well-known actor. Like for most people, like for most photographers, that's the dream. Like they go from taking pictures of their dog uh, on a walk through the park to AMC calling you and saying like, "Hey, we've got this shoot for you. We're going to pay you to hang out with these famous guys." How did you approach that? Because like, I mean, like some people like, were you just chill with it? Like, yeah, man, I can do that. Or was there like a little bit of like, shit, now I've hit the big time. I've got to produce the goods. Like how did your stress level on that was like?
I would say that my stress level, I I don't think that my stress level was too high
Mhm.
in compared to other jobs.
Okay.
I think that again, I would like to say that people are people,
Hmm.
whether they're billionaires or they are a kid that just wants to hang out with their mom or their dad. Just
Yep.
people are people, and they have the
Yep.
same needs. And I think that sitting down with someone who's famous or photographing someone who's famous or where there's a lot of money and production value involved doesn't necessarily make me more stressed. I think it just reinforces what I know personally
Hmm.
to be true, which is just people are people, and that
Yep.
I shouldn't approach a famous person and a very renowned company in any different way than I should approach a family that wants to have a few pictures for their wall. They deserve the same amount of client care, and I
Hmm.
think that my job, it doesn't change at all. It doesn't change at all. It's to produce good pictures and be kind to people and try to have some fun. And I think
Yep.
that I try to do that with the family shoot, and I try to do that with um, a celebrity. Job doesn't change just because other people scream in the street when they see the person you're photographing walk by, which did happen several times, by the way.
Oh wow. Well, it's interesting you bring that up because like you forget sometimes like when I went back to Canada, Vancouver, I'm not sure if you know, is like they call it the Hollywood of the North.
Yeah, I
because
love it. It's awesome.
love it. And one of the things I didn't realize or was prepared for was the fact that, yeah, like when you would be walking down the street, you would hear like people just like, oh my God. And then you would like turn around and it's like, some famous dude. And it's, yeah, like yeah, same thing. I never really got starstruck when I've bumped into famous celebrities during that time. But I think I really love the point that you make where you're giving them the same client care as someone who's got like a 3-year-old and stuff like that. And I think that sort of gives me a lot of insight into how well you can manage all aspects, but also your character as well. Kind of on the same thing, like you have been featured in a lot of international publications, as we mentioned, New York Times and whatnot, and local domestic publications. I think a lot of people, again, when they get into photography, they want to sort of branch off into these specific jobs. Can you discuss any sort of aspects of like how do you get into that area? How do you start into working with like commercial photography, or how do you get how do you build these client lists? Like, are they searching you out, or are you building up your website or anything like that? Or
Well, I think that it's kind of crazy. We're talking about market strategy, and we're talking about luck and networking and serendipity.
Yeah.
Of the whirlpool of all of those things together. And I don't think that I definitely couldn't write a blog post or be featured on a strategy podcast.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of different things, being in the right place at the right time, being open to the universe. If you're hippie trippy,
law of attraction. Yeah.
I think it is, for me, speaking for me and just personally, how it happened for me is, I think just working really, really hard, and taking good photographs and being reflective. And I think that, eventually when you start developing a style and you start being true to your style and consistent with your style, I think that the clients that are right for you will start to come. I really do think that. In fact, talking about the Times is a really recognizable name. And when you say that, you've done a job for the Times, that's kind of peak pinnacle for a name, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you've made it or that you've arrived.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You're definitely still wanting to reach out and to work with different clients and have good experiences with all sorts of different clients. For me, the Times is actually interesting. I originally thought I was receiving a prank from a friend when the Times reached out. Have we ever talked about this before?
No, you haven't. But please explain, because I'm gonna share something with you afterwards. I think it just gave me goosebumps. So
there's all sorts of photography spam and phishing scams that we all need to be aware of and be wary of. I got one a couple weeks ago that was the dream job for Nat Geo. Of course you work for Nat Geo, so it's like so it is possible to receive an email from Nat Geo. But I got the one from Nat Geo last week. It's like, oh, we want you to go to New Zealand. No, it's just, and that's the oldest phishing scam on the block at this point. But coming back to the Times, I got an email pretty much when I had arrived in Japan, maybe in 2015, 2016, early 2016, maybe. And it was very, very short, and it said, the editor's name, and they wanted me to fly somewhere for them. I was like, oh, this is somebody just made up an email address, and it's just yanking my chain because they know I want to be a professional photographer. And I just wrote back, admittedly somewhat flippantly, a little bit short-handed. Such I wrote back like, oh, I'd love to work for you. Reach out whenever. Let me know what you want me to do. And thinking, oh, it's just a buddy. And I didn't hear anything back, so I just assumed that it was a buddy, and they probably felt a little bit guilty about pulling my chain on my hopes and my dreams.
Yeah.
And then like maybe 4 or 5 months later, I don't know, half a year later, who knows? They reached back out and apologized for the delay in response and said, "Here's your assignment. We need you hop on a plane and be here and go." And yeah, I did that. But I think that where I'd like to get back to your original question is, how do you develop that client list? I think that you just do a really, really good job, do the best job you can do with every job.
Yeah.
And I think that, photography world on our end as image makers and creative, we live in a small community. Everyone's a photographer, of course, but professional photographers, it's not that big a world. We know each other's and how we work. It's the same for editors and publications. And editors and publications also move around frequently, and they talk and they network. And I think that if you are a kind person and you put your best foot forward and try to do a good job, and you're not an asshole, that your name gets spread around, and you are hired for multiple jobs, and some of those work out, some of them don't, but you just continue to do your best and you break your back to do a good job. And I think that's really how it comes, is you just do your best, Jason.
Give 110%. Yes.
Do your best work.
It's hilarious. Like,
it's true.
It is, like, I mean, it's one of these things where, like, just in all the other stuff I've done over the years, especially with freelance work, like, you made a good point about it's a small pool. And the other thing is that I think people don't realize is that with a lot of these publications, they don't want to, and if any young ears are listening, I'll give you warning. They don't want anything to fuck up. So they want to hire someone who they know can deliver. They know that they can easily work with, and they know that is going to, like, they're going to show up on time if they say be in Hokkaido at this date at 8 a.m. at this location. They don't want to hold your hand.
No.
And I'm not going to say that there's very few people capable of that, but when someone says, like, I need a photographer in Japan that's capable of doing this, the pool shrinks immensely.
Dramatically. And then when you also add our common characteristic of being a foreigner in the countries in which we operate, that pool becomes even smaller.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You bring up a good point, and we were talking before about adaptability and transfer skill. And a lot of the transfer skill aren't just the fundamentals of photography or consistent styling. Of course, primarily that's the product that any editorial commercial client, doesn't matter. They want the product that you showcase as your product. But the transfer skills associated with are found in other realms, right? Communication, punctuality, adaptability, flexibility, and knowing, like you were talking about, being hiring someone that you can trust and know that no matter what kind of curveball is going to be thrown their way, which as a professional photographer, it's going to happen every shoot. There's going to be some sort of curveball. They don't want someone who has a history or a habit of learned helplessness. And an editor doesn't want to solve problems for you. You have to be willing to navigate and solve problems that might not even exist behind the camera. Because at the end of the day, a deadline is a deadline, and an editor really doesn't care if your flight was delayed or if your new camera isn't working the way you thought it was, or if the client is an unkind person or the subject is an unkind person. They're hiring you to deliver an image, and you have to have a diverse skill set in order to be able to deliver that product on time every time.
Exactly. And I think, like, that's sort of, the other side of photography is, like, I can think of countless stories of those, like, strange curveballs where it might not even be equipment failure. It could be, you're set on a deadline, and their end, like, whatever platform you're using to upload the images to doesn't work, and you have enough experience or whatnot to say, okay, like, here, I've set up a Dropbox link for you just in case that shit, and for them, that's what's going to get you the next job, because they're going to be like, oh shit, like this guy knows,
You're talking about how do you maintain, or build that client list.
Yeah.
When an editor realizes, even if you don't tell them, because again, an editor really doesn't care about the problems you encountered. They care about the image. But when the editor inevitably, or the commissioning agent, or the artistic director inevitably finds out about all the problems that happened, and the fact that you, one, didn't mention them, two, navigated them, and three, delivered the product on time.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's going to get you the second job and the third job and the 30th job. And then when that editor leaves that publication or that brand and goes to the next one, now you're on that client roster, you're on that client list. And that is what I've found to be there's some magnetism towards that when you become a staple for that editor or commissioning agent. Other agents look to that person to find people they trust, and then your client list really, really expands.
Exactly. And I think like
the biggest hurdle though, Jason,
yes, that's what I want to know.
The biggest hurdle though that I find where the pressure really exists, especially if you know how to operate your camera, you've got your consistent style, is you're only as good as your last image. You're only as good as your last set. And so I find that the inherent pressure is really I'm competitive, but I'm competitive against myself.
Yeah.
And that is a very a tricky thing, and kind of a mental game that is not healthy for us as photographers to play, because there's a lot of pressure associated with that, right?
Yeah. How do you find, like, because like when we talk about competition, even with yourself, like, I mean, this is something that I've battled, not even on a professional level, but even on like a personal level, is like, year after year, we're in these locations and we're shooting. Yeah, sometimes, like, I always joke about shooting out my back window and getting the same sunset over and over again. But how do you handle that competition? Because I think there is a need to go bigger, go better, incorporate more complex, angles and setups versus, the same consistent style, the same setup over and over again, and getting, maybe there's a chance people will get bored of it. How do you juggle that? Because, like, I mean, there is that feeling that, oh, I've got to go bigger. I've got to go, like, I've got to dangle this person off the side of a building, to get that next shot. How do you subdue that?
Well, I hear two things in that question. One, how do you keep a consistent style, but still keep it fresh and still keep it interesting, not only for yourself, but for your clients, so that you're not a one-trick pony, for lack of better expression. I think that what I do for that is I shoot multiple genres.
Hey, there we go.
I look for inspiration from that family shoot and embed it, or color my commercial shoot with what I just learned about light in that family shoot. And so I start using those transferable hard skills that we learn in different genres to kind of better the craft in the particular genre that the assignment, that I'm working on is. The other thing that you asked there, Jason, was, how do I balance the one-upsmanship against myself? And I'm not very good at that. I admit that I'm not very good at that. But one thing that I try to remind myself, have you ever read this book? It's a children's book. It's called The Hope for the Flowers.
Hope for the Flowers. No, I haven't.
It's a great children's book. I'll send you a copy for Christmas.
Okay.
It's great, bro. The whole premise of this book is that there are all these caterpillars that are climbing this tree or limb, stick, whatever you want to call it, and it's endless, and they're all climbing over each other, They're like, we got to get up there, up there. Spoiler, even though you're going to get it for Christmas, is there's nothing up there, bro. There's absolutely nothing up there. And I think that what I found is that I'm no happier now, or feel no more sense of accomplished now than when I was starting the photographic journey.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I'm still applying the same sort of mindset, is just, what can I do now? What am I learning? Am I having fun with it? And if I'm not, then there's something going on there. And when I realize that I'm not having fun, or I wasn't my best self personally or professionally at a shoot,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I just need to stop and realize, like, what am I aiming for? Am I just climbing up this pole, trying to get better and better and better? But to what end? Is there a purpose in that? And I think just kind of reminding myself that, wherever I'm at right now is okay. And just focus on what's going on right now. Just focus on this shoot. Focus on what I can learn from this shoot, and whatever happens later with the one-upsmanship, either bigger clients will come,
mm-hmm.
quote unquote bigger, or they won't. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
And I think that's a topic I want to really jump into, because, like, as I mentioned before, like in a previous podcast I did, I examined kind of the one-upsmanship, but we were talking a little bit about before in the preamble about, like, the quote unquote pressure to be a professional photographer rather than just a photographer. And I have no idea. I guess it means that, like, if you are, what you mentioned, you had a really good point about, like, wherever you are now, that's okay. And a lot of people, when they get to a certain level, they're like, oh, well, I'm just a hobbyist, and, Mr. Andrew here is a professional photographer, so his skill level must be, like, eclipsing mine. Whereas maybe the reality is that you're closer than you are. It's just where you throw your hat. Or what do you think about that? Because, like, the titles, people seemingly in the photography realm get really wrapped up into that, whether you do gigs or not.
Well, I'm with you on that, and I think that's one of the toxic aspects of our industry, is one labeling. That's going to be one, but I think that's probably with any industry. And similarly, another toxic aspect about the photography industry is the fact that there's such a level of comparison that is so damaging to the self. It's you're looking externally for some goalpost of success, where your peers are defining success, and client lists define success. And whether someone's a full-time photographer or not versus part-time, or even a hobbyist, somehow determines where they are on on the scale of awesomeness. But right, on the awesome photography scale. But I think in reality, like, when I look at several hobbyists, quote unquote hobbyists I know, that their skill set is far superior and well tuned and well honed in comparison to many professional photographers I know that are full time and have been full time for 2 decades. And so, I think an extraction of client list is really, really important. I think the extraction of Instagram follower count is hyper necessary. I think to be objective about where you are is to, again, just look at where you are, right? Just look at where you are. And if you're a hobbyist, great. Do your hobby and do it to the best of your ability. And if you're a full-time professional, do it to the best of your ability. But it's the external validation and jostling and comparison that really hurts us emotionally and hurts us psychologically, to the point where some of us get into a defeatist mindset where they use that word "just." Man, you're just a photographer. What a damaging word. You're not that. You're a hobbyist photographer, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just make good images. And it also has to do with intention. Some of us are in a place where being a hobbyist for an hour a week is all that we can afford with our, personal situations, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's family or with it's, a different full-time job. You have to accept where you are in life. And if you're okay where you are in life, there's nothing wrong with being just that,
Yeah.
it's okay to be that. There's nothing wrong with being quote unquote just a hobbyist, right?
Yeah.
There's
Well,
arbitrary labels so that we can feel better about ourselves and make other people feel worse, I guess. I don't know.
I like it. It's one of these things where when I had heard this sort of thing come up, there was two very famous individuals that came to mind, and my art history is a little bit vague, but I'm not sure if it's Van Gogh or one of those photographers, painters who I don't think he sold a single painting while he was alive, and then when he died, after that, his paintings became like world famous. So if you think about that, like the label, quote unquote, hobbyist or just a whatever photographer, you didn't work a single job, but afterwards, you become famous. And that goes for, there's the New York street photographer that I forget her name.
Vivian
But
Mayer.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She was like a nanny, right? And
And the boxes and boxes and boxes in the attic are some of the sickest shots that have ever the shutter ever been clicked on.
Exactly. And like you would be slapped upside the head if you said, "Oh yeah, Vivian, she's just hobbyist, nanny, weekend warrior." Yeah.
Well, a weekend warrior. Well, we can use those terms. Really, what you just mean is like, hey, I shoot on weekends, and again, so what? So what if you just shoot on weekends? So what if you just shoot in the 30 minutes that you have on your commute to work? It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with the quality of images you make.
Yeah.
Which makes me think about. Let's get philosophical, Jason.
Okay, let's do it. Okay.
What the hell is a photographer then? Like, I guess everyone's a photographer. If you're shooting with your iPhone, if you're shooting with an iPad, who cares?
Yep.
Like, as long as you're making the images that you're feeling comfortable with and happy with, then you're a photographer. Like, well, there you go.
My point exactly. And and like I've seen this so many times where like I've seen individuals, let's throw capabilities out the word, where they've picked up a camera, put a few weekends into learning how it is, and started shooting for different companies around the city. So within half a year, they've gone from zero to professional photographer.
Sure.
Is that a correct moniker? Who cares if that's what they enjoy? And in the same sense as that, if someone who has a camera and they've, Vivian Mayer, like decades of stuff, throws it in the attic, time forgets it till someone picks it up and goes, "Holy shit!"
Exactly. It's the individual. It's the individual, and what what do you want in life? What's going to make you happy? What works for your personal situation? And I think it's the focus. I think it's the focus on self and to do what you love because you love it, not because, again, like the hope for the flowers that I mentioned. You're just climbing for the sake of climbing.
Well, it's like we talked a little bit about like sort of the hit that the industry took during pandemic, and like I kind of the inspiration for that was like I went from this major high to basically for the better part of, I'd say, 3 years, two at most, completely unemployed. Like I was sitting in my underwear at times, like putting together these podcasts. But what really I stepped back from was there was this pressure of like, oh, if I'm not working photography jobs, then I'm no longer a professional photographer. And kind of the realization I had recently over, I'd say, the past year, but like every time I do this, last, I would say, when was it now? Tuesday morning, I was in a creek in the Unmun Valley, just outside of Ulsan.
Oh, beautiful.
Fall weather. I was sitting on my ass, taking pictures, drinking the coffee I just brewed on my little coffee camp kit there. And to me, like there was nothing better photography or life-wise than that moment. And I'm not getting paid for that. There's no, it's not going to be broadcasted on a billboard in a magazine. But for me, like that was the pinnacle of my photographic, journey.
Success.
Yeah, that was success for me.
Success.
What about you? Like, have you, like, we were talking about the ups and downs. Like, have you come across that realization, or like, because obviously you're Hollywood superstars, brand name clients. Are you a baller, or are you coming more of a philosophical point where you're balancing being a father, teacher, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that I'm starting to become a more sit in the creek and brew the coffee. Take a picture of that leaf that was awesome sitting right to me. It comes back to the your individual version of success. And first of all, congratulations on your successful shoot there.
Thank you.
Because you were working with your most important client, yourself.
Yep. Definitely.
That's horrible.
the most critical client, me.
It's the truth, though. I think that I am hugging the line between the philosophical meditative practice and doing it for myself, and then wanting to continue to be an active shooter for brands and clients, because I enjoy it. That's what it comes down to, is I enjoy that. But, you mentioned my family and you mentioned other passions. You're an educator, Jason. Yep. Some people are educators because it's an avenue to explore the world. Or for some people, it's a paycheck. But like you, I know you well enough to know that you truly love teaching, right? It's okay to have multiple passions. And I think that, what we were talking about earlier with shooting different genres, it's okay to not be in a niche, right? Yeah. So I'm personally not in a niche in life. I'm not just a photographer. I would hate to be just a photographer. That's so limiting. First and foremost, I'm a father. I mean, in the room behind us is a beautiful 8-year-old boy who's everything.
Yeah,
he's everything. And if it came down between spending time behind the camera and spending time with my son, 100 times out of 100, I'm going to be with him.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same with my wife, and I also, I teach photography as well. I'm a humanities teacher. I have a lot of different passions, and I think that one of those skills, we were talking about transferable skills, is balance. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do because, photography is something that I selfishly love, and I'm not using selfishness in a negative, with a negative connotation. We need to fill our own cups, and photography does that for me. Tunnel vision and being alone fills my soul. It really does. But so does spending time with my son, and so does spending quality time with my wife and traveling with them, and so does teaching photography and helping other people develop a love for photography. So I think that I even into 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, however many years I've been shooting for, I'm still learning how to balance, but I think I'm doing a lot better job of it now, especially post-pandemic, when, like you said, jobs became few and far between. I'm doing a better job now, but I'm thankful for the pandemic. Actually, it decimated my bank account, but I'm not thankful for that. But I am thankful for the fact that it made me realize that, you don't need to be on the road 3 or 4 months out of the year. Right. You need to find some sort of balance between all of the things you love. Right. Yeah. And I was becoming a little bit lopsided on the photography end.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
And I can't lie to you, Jason. You start getting, you can easily get swept into the whirlpool of ambition and whirlpool of client lists and bigger jobs, etc. And I definitely was starting to fall into that. Just working. I think that it's maybe not even ambition, but just working and becoming a workaholic. And the pandemic was a blessing in disguise because it helped me recalibrate. And so that's where I am now. That was a really long-winded answer. Sorry, bud. But
no, that was perfect. That was perfect.
Now, thanks to the pandemic and a few heart-to-heart conversations with others.
Well, and I think you brought up a really good point about like sort of the recalibration, because like I've talked to a number of people that like and this is kind of branching into my next question about your photography teaching, but one of the things that I had mentioned was that sort of that black hole that you get into where it's like you shoot this huge job and then you go into the digital dark room. I've got my office here, so it's like I've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of photos over a shoot that you've got to, and you don't see the light of day for like weeks, even though you're here. It does wear thin on your other responsibilities. And I think like that when you're able to recalibrate, that's an important factor because it gives you that perspective. Jumping into your teaching, I didn't realize that you were teaching photography. Has that allowed you to sort of, because you mentioned you've been a photographer for a couple of decades now, and I think for us as educators, like we did, we teach here in something completely different. We shoot here, and it's like two different worlds. You're almost two different personalities. And I found, like, when you branch those, like your love of photography, your love of teaching, has it given you more perspective or a different approach to your own photography, or how are you finding that sort of new realm?
That's a great question. I teach primarily humanities. I think that it's actually influenced photography and photography humanities more than necessarily teaching photography. But I think they all work together, pair really, really nicely. I think that my teaching philosophy is pretty similar to the way I photograph. I don't necessarily like to go for breadth. I like to go for depth. Really try to hone in on the essence of a subject. And I think that comes out in my style with photography, and I also think it comes out with my style in teaching too. And so I think that they both kind of influence each other, and I think stylistically they're probably pretty similar. Humanities especially, I think, thinking about the discipline of humanities and thinking about what it means to be human, I think that has really helped me as a photographer. Professionally, I was a teacher well before photography. In fact, it's the opposite. I've been a teacher for 2 decades and a photographer for a little more than one, maybe 12 or 13 years now. But I think that my love for human nature has really influenced my craft of photography, not the other way around. I think the pairing of the two of education and photography work really, really well together, just because of some of the transferable skills and being mindful of how to really isolate a subject and showcase it. In its best light. Pardon the photography pun there, but how do you get to the core essence of a subject with a student? How can you explain it so that it is easily understandable? And then when I think about my style in photography, I think that one common thing that would be found in my portfolio is really just essence of subject. So I think that they pair well together, and I love teaching, I love shooting, and it's professionally it's kind of the perfect mix of what I want to do.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, because like I had just over the I was just gonna say, like,
you teach as well. So what, from your perspective, how do you feel that those two professional lives come together and pair off each other?
Well, I think it's for me, it really helped me gain a kind of an appreciation for photography that I wouldn't say I lost, but it was like when you see someone approach a subject for the first time and you're there guiding them, like I'm not a chalk and talk kind of person. I'm sort of, more of, like I open the door, they walk through it. And when you see that appreciation, when you see that light go off and when you're showing a particular skill set or a particular lesson and they get it, they get that photo and they get the goosebumps and they're showing you. I think for me, it's just, it gives me a new appreciation for the art of photography and that feeling that we had, when we first got that shot or when we did that. And as I was thinking also about this recently, again, in the valley with my cup of coffee, we talk about the tunnel vision, and I've shot that same valley. It's marked on my cacao maps. I go there every year and I explore and I play in the water. But this past year that I've been teaching more, I've stepped out of that tunnel a little bit to step back and say, like, what would my students think in this situation, or how would I show them what I am seeing? And I think it allowed me to kind of not re-energize, but like just reevaluate that scene and how I can capture it and explain it to them. So yeah.
Right. Well, I like that you're talking about being able to step back, all right, and seeing something, perhaps in a more gestalt way, where the larger vision or the larger scene in front of you is much more than the sum of its parts. And I think that one of the trickiest things that I've found as a teacher of photography is I have a particular vision, I have particular style, and what I've learned quickly is that it's better for me to do what you just really eloquently explained, is to be able to step back and to realize that my vision is not what others' vision should be, and that the way I approach a scene is not the way everyone should approach a scene. And I love that you said you're there, you open the door, you're there to guide and to open the door, but not to embed your vision into their camera, right? It's their camera. Yeah. To figure it out. And I think that being able to have, a large frame and to help others, enter that frame and to find where they are comfortable existing with a camera, within that larger scene, is great. Because just like you, when I'm teaching photography, I get that giddy feeling when a student comes to me and they're chimping the back of their camera and they're like, "Yo, check this out," and it's completely different than the way I would have shot it or the way I would have approached that natural element or that scenario that we've set up, and I'm kind of taken aback by it, like, whoa, that really works. I would have never thought that way. So something that I'm really, really enjoying is seeing other people's process, and don't tell them this, but I'm starting to nick some of their tricks.
Yeah.
And learning, I think probably just as much from my students as they are from me, which is, that's the way that teaching should be, though, right? Yeah. Is that you're forming a learning community and you just happen to be the person that sets up the experience. And, then from that point, you should be kind of learning together.
Well, that's sort of like when I first started, like I was really sort of concerned. I didn't want to come off as like, the big show, like, all right, this is what I do. And like, I'm going to show you my shit. I didn't want to do that. And kind of actually last week I was really over the moon with my class, just how they approached it. And it was sort of like a gonzo kind of class. But as you know, like my wife is also an educator. She had a big bag of like Halloween costumes. And what I've been sort of more focusing on my students is not like, because everybody gets caught up with like, well, I don't have a DSLR. I've got, a iPhone. And I keep telling them like, guys, like my first 300D was like a 6 point something megapixel. Like it was nothing. You guys got more shit. in your little phone. Like, it's all about the story.
Right.
And I said, so like, we're talking about spooky images and telling the story and how you can convey that concept of eeriness. Like, so it's not like on the nose, like, vampire, or something. It's how do you convey that eeriness? And the interesting point, I set this out. We gave the lesson. I watched them sort of interact, and they were putting on wigs, and then I saw the genius come out. Like, they were using the shadows and like the photos that came. Like, I was just like, oh my, like, because I never even thought about some of this stuff. Like the shadows, no idea. There was like, they were using like reflections and getting like sort of that gritty, something's watching you sort of vibe, and it blew me away. And for myself, like, it was like really interesting to sort of, again, say like, here is what I'm kind of showing you. Now it's your turn to walk through that door. And I think like that's what I love about like the photography teaching aspect of it, is like when they can take that home and say like, I made this.
Well, yeah, and it's the I made this, that there is ownership from a student, that they created it. It wasn't because of you. You didn't help them do that. They did that. And not only did they do that, they took, they took a prompt from you, or they took a challenge from you, or they took the scenario, but then they made it theirs. And that's where they became the photographer. They became the creator. They took it, they owned it, they learned it. And what's great about that is that grows. I mean, that's how we became professional photographers, right? Is that you find something, you find joy in it, you found success in it, and then you ask yourself that central question: now, what else is possible?
Yeah.
What else what's next? And then your their attitude and your attitude, it becomes a snowball and spirals, and the next thing you know, they got the jobs that you're doing. They start applauding them for it, because that's what's supposed to happen, right? At some point, we have to pass the torch.
100%.
And that's okay, and I'm fine with that. That's the way. I mean, that's the nature of things.
Well, exactly, and I think like kind of to sort of put this into a like not like a philosophical point again, but there's that, like, what I find, going all the way back to the beginning of this, like coming from a small community. I'm going to use that word again, community. It's an abundance mindset. Like, it's everybody helps everybody to get a little bit of a higher status. And I think as educators, like, that's, I think one of the things I've noticed is that there is like a little bit of a scarcity mindset where it's like, oh, this is mine. Like, I'm not going to tell you how I got this shit, or I'm not going to tell you where I go to get these shots. Whereas,
man. The community, one of the things that I miss most about Korea and being in Korea was the special time and the place where we got to know each other. There were several phenomenal photographers. We can start rattling them off, the name's Dylan Goldie, Roy.
Exactly. Yep.
Jason Teal, of course, you, and Pete DeMarco. Jessica Murray Bergen, excuse me. It goes on and on.
Yeah.
Where there was a community there where there wasn't, I love that you use the scarcity mindset, right? That it wasn't about holding on to a client or holding on to a contact or holding on to a technique. I think that we realized we leaned into that abundance mindset where we're stronger together. We're stronger as a collective. We teach each other those new tricks, and we weren't holding on to them like they were some like little black book of secrets. And there is no little black book of secrets anymore. The internet exists. All you got to do is read. But what we were doing is, I think that we were facilitating each other's learning. But more than that, I think that we were supporting each other to be the best photographers that we can be. And it's sad to see certain communities with that scarcity mindset that refuse to pass on a job that's not a right fit for their skill set or for their personal situation, and not to refer another client. And thinking that they're going to steal their client, or it's there's enough to go around. There's enough to go around. As long as the world keeps turning, people are going to be making images and documenting, and it's a big world, and there's a lot of things in it. And more than that, coming back to what we were talking about with our photography students, is that any subject can be photographed in an infinite amount of ways.
100%.
So to think that we have ownership over any aspect of photography is quite limiting to ourselves. It's limiting to the community, and it's damaging to the zeitgeist at large, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think like that's sort of the thing. Like when we talk about, like, because I've harped on this for like decades now about community, and like how I got to, like, even I would say if you remember back when Dylan invited us all up to have that little like group chats in Seoul, and
Yeah,
we
that was great.
That was amazing, and the fact that we all came as equals, and like I took from that like years, like if somebody is like and again, like looking at the community, as you said, like I am not a wedding photographer. Like it's not in my core. Like I can photograph you, yes, but I can't bring out the beauty or the wispiness of anything. Like I don't know how to direct that sort of shot. When I have that, and inevitably comes my way because people see Jason Teal, photographer, can you shoot my son's wedding? No, but I know like 3 other photographers I'm going to pass this on to. And I think like that community, like, because you've got each other's back. And, the same thing, like a couple of years ago, I was on TV, Noah Alonso just gave me amazing. Yeah. Gave me a shout out. Like he said like, hey, like this TV crew wants to do this thing. Are you up for it? Yeah. And the reason is that like it all goes back and forth. Like nobody's hoarding this shit. And it's no skin off of his back. It's no skin off of my back. But as soon as you start getting into that scarcity mindset, then it's like, you're looking at people like, oh, what's this guy doing in my neck of the woods? Like, this is my territory. Like, you're going to like shank him or something, So it makes it for a terrible scene. And as we mentioned, going back to that pool of photographers, when you're living abroad, when you're looking at English speaking foreign photographer living in this area, and I mean, there's like, and there's enough jobs to go around, and you might as well, like, as I said, like times are going to be tough, here's a point, here's a job,
And it's interesting you said that times are going to be tough. We're in an interesting industry with photography that there are it's highly susceptible to so many different forces, economic, geopolitical, the list really, really goes on and on and on. The market fluctuates so dramatically that I think that anyone that enters it needs to be prepared for feast or famine.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that when I say be prepared for it, it's not only be prepared for feast and famine, where we're talking about budgeting and putting some stuff away because the next year is going to be horrible. Even if you made $200,000 this year, next year it could be $200, right?
Yeah.
We both experienced that, especially with COVID.
Yeah.
But moving past it's feast or famine for me, realizing that it's a natural ebb and flow of the industry.
Yeah.
Right. And that when you are feasting, someone else is in need. And inevitably, soon it's going to be their turn to feast, and it's going to be your turn to recalibrate, or to be given, quote unquote, be given the opportunity to recalibrate, and not have the jobs. And I think that comes with just a level of professional maturity, and a level of community understanding and industry understanding, and accepting that that is a characteristic of the profession that we chose to be in.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that anyone that's coming out of a scarcity mindset or that is hoarding, whether it's technique or contacts or jobs, etc., is I hate to say it, but let's drop another cliche. Karma's coming.
Karma. Yeah.
Karma's coming.
Karma's a bitch. Yeah. Well, I think for me, like where I came from it, and this was sort of, again, going back all the way to those first few questions we talked about. Like, I come from a small city and in a solid community, and growing up here, like the expat community has been fractured a little bit. You know, it's, you know, with the K-pop and stuff. Like, I'm sure Tokyo has that same sort of thing where, you know, in Seoul, when you were in that international school years ago, like there was that small, you know, like there was a close-knit community. There weren't that many foreigners. But now it's massive. And even in my neck of the woods, like it's gotten a little fractured. And back in 2020, when I went home for my father's funeral, I was really put back by the community aspect. You know, it was like, you know, friends, guys across the street that just moved in would come over, say like, look, you know what, I've got you covered. You need something, I'll hook you up. And it was that really like just an odd feeling after being so long away from it, that when I came back to Ulsan, you know, like I do the Ulsan online and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people that work from a larger center do have that sort of protectionist armor that they put on. Like, if I give you something, you're going to use it against me or something, or you're going to take something more away from me. And I think that the community that we built up back in the day with the photography had that sort of same small town vibe. And I wonder if it's because, you know, like yourself and myself and a few others came from those smaller neighborhoods where it's like, you know what, if you need to borrow a camera, you know, like, give me a shout out. I know you're good for it. So, you know, take some equipment, like that sort of thing. Like, I know Greg Samborski had the same sort of like, you know, small town mentality, like, you know.
Absolutely. Dylan's coming from a small place in Australia. Yeah. You know, I know Jessica's was coming from the South. You know, that's a question that I don't know if that influenced it. It likely could have. That's for sure. I mean, that would make sense. It's a good theory, regardless of where we came from or the communities that we were raised in. I think that one can develop community mindset.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's hard to find. It's not only hard to find, I think that finding it is incredibly lucky, but I think that it requires cultivation.
Yeah.
And it requires effort. And I think we're in a really interesting point in history.
Yeah.
Where, you know, there's so much convenience. Things are brought in. We bring in our dinner, we bring in our groceries, we bring in everything. There's not a whole lot of initiative to go out to seek and more than just seek to and hope to find it. It's rare to find fellow shooters that are willing to develop community. And we need more of that, especially to come back to your point, Jason. We want to establish a photographic community, not even a photographic community, an artistic community that shares in the joys and the hardships of what we choose to do artistically and professionally. We need that support system. It can be lonely. I don't know about you, but you know, there are a lot of times as a photographer that it's really lonely. You know, you're on planes by yourself, you're in hotels by yourself, you're looking at briefs by yourself, you're editing by yourself, you're in that cave, like you said. And I think it's really essential for our health to be able to find colleagues and to develop our networks, not only to the end that we're finding jobs and putting bread on the table, but that we have that we have people that we can confide in and just support us through those good times and those bad
Mm-hmm.
times.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point, like with the loneliness aspect of it. Because like I remember like working with different magazines, and yeah, it was just basically like you yourself go out to this location, shoot this subject. And I mean, yeah, for a time being, there's people around that will like, that either they work for the company that you're shooting, but I didn't find any sort of personal connection. It was like you were like in Fight Club, what they call it, like the single serving friend,
Yeah,
like you're
single serving friend on the airplane.
yeah,
Tyler Durden and Edward Norton's character is that you, Tyler, are my most favorite single serving friend, and Tyler Durden gets it whenever. Yeah, I love that bit.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Single serving being friends on jobs, and of course, there are times that you do meet someone you connect with, and you have a drink or a meal with after the after the shoot. But largely, that's hard to find, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's usually by yourself.
Exactly, and like I always laugh because like especially with the landscape stuff, like people like my students even have asked me like like, well, if you're going out, give me a call. And I said, well, okay, well, I'm going to be getting up at 4 a.m. Like I can come and pick you up, and we're gonna go out before it's even light. 4 a.m. Yeah, and I said, we're going to be shooting for a couple of hours, and then yeah, no, I'm good, and it's tough to find like that sort of thing. So yeah, it can be kind of lonely, but I think that it's again like it's building that community up where you do find those individuals. And I think like even recently with the photo walks and stuff like that, and going with the students, it's incredibly interesting to sort of once again have that group, because like there's a couple of jobs where I did like I was saying with the Olympics, or when I did like the sports photography, where you would go into like the media room, and there's other people there that was like, did you get the shots, did you try this angle, and you're like, yeah, no, I'll try it. But after that, just doing a magazine or something, it was incredibly like there was a separation. Like it was, you just go in, eat food by yourself, go home. Yeah.
That's cool. And the solitary aspect, it's one aspect of it is lonely, but then the other part of it is fulfilling, because that alone time is kind of what you need to be meditative to get the shots. I think just like everything else, though, it's finding the balance. It's being able to find a community to lean into and support, so that then you can work together, so that then you can work by yourself, and so that all aspects of shooting and editing and networking, etc., feel like they're helping you develop a range of skills and a range of comfort levels with the multiple aspects that we have to deal with, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not just shooting, right? It's not just editing. It's not just networking. All those things need to come into some sort of harmony with each other. And not only do we need our time by ourselves to be able to develop our style and our skills, but we need to be with other people too, so that we're not those lone shooters out there being by ourselves.
Sitting in a creek with their camping kit.
Their coffee.
Yeah. Exactly.
Jason, am I going to find like a billion shots of that leaf in an attic after you're long and gone?
Probably. There's going to be like a that and like 2 decades worth of the same shot out my back window at the same time.
There's something to be said for taking that shot out of your back window. I think there are actually a couple monographs from photographers who've made a career on just photographing the same scene throughout seasons and years. I think there's something to be said for that. I can't wait to find those photographs.
Oh yeah, you'll know what I'm talking about. Yeah,
before your wife goes through them,
before she makes the $1 million coffee table book out the back.
That's right. The next Vivian.
Yeah, the next Vivian. Yeah, I'll have to get a better name. But
it works.
It works, maybe. Yeah. All right. Well, wrapping things up, I'll give you the same question I normally give out to all of my famous guests. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you want to promote or want to let the community know about, or what are you got? What's in store for you in the next weeks or months or years? What's in the pot?
I wish that I could have something to plug, tell you about a book that's coming out,
Yeah.
tell you about a podcast that's coming up. Check out my YouTube channel that you can like and subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm working on right now is being a happy father and a good husband.
There you go.
Learning how to clean up my room and my office. Photographically, I'm taking a bit of time right now to chill. And I think that the next thing that anyone sees out of me that has some legs to stand on, or that's anything of substance, might be a departure from Japan. It might be a body of work that is different from what you might expect me to create. I'm looking for something different right now, and I don't know what that is, but I do know that I'm feeling that my season in Japan and the typical things that I've been shooting for the last decade here is coming to a close, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know that there's something coming. But I don't know what that is. And you know what, Jason Teal?
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
Perfect. That's exciting, though. Actually,
it's really, really exciting. I don't know what's coming next, but I know something's coming, but I don't know what that is. Give me a year. Give me a year.
Right.
You'll see something.
We'll recap November 3rd of 2024.
I can't wait. Bro, it's been so awesome talking to you.
It's been great.
I know that you have a loyal following with your podcast and with your photography. You're an amazing photographer. But what I don't think people really get, I'm sure they do get it when they listen to you speak. But you're the kindest, most gentle person that I know, and you're just a pleasure to be with and around. And I thank you for having me. You. For just chilling out with me and catching up. I appreciate you, man. You're awesome.
Thank you. And I've got to say, like, the reason I've had you is that conversation that we had in that small coffee shop in Tokyo, and I think with the Faux before, sort of resonated me for so many years, because I think, like, I want to echo that in that sort of I love you too, bro kind of aspect. It's really interesting to come across somebody like yourself who's a great photographer, but you're sort of so grounded, and it's inspirational to see someone like that. You've hit so many highs, but also you have like the knowledge that you do, and it's just I'm really happy that you agreed to come on this little podcast. My loyal following includes my mom and maybe my wife, so they'll be happy to hear.
My mom and my wife are now jumping on that too.
All right, perfect.
You're too kind. Honestly, you are. Hey, this has been great. Let's do this again, okay?
We should, and definitely, I've gotta jump across the pond at some point, and we gotta meet up again for a cup of coffee.
You're always welcome at mine, man. Always welcome.
All right. Once again, I just have to thank Andy for coming on the podcast. It was an amazing interview, and I hope you guys really enjoyed sort of the insight that he gave. And with that being said, let's wrap things up, and I'll see you again a little bit later on.